This is Fireside Chat with Magnus Grimeland, founder and CEO of Antler. This session will be moderated by Latifah Daud, Executive Director and Head of Strategic Human Capital at Khazanah. Over to you, Latifah.
Thank you, Shakira. After ice cream and that break announcement, do we still have people? Okay. Anyway, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the KMF Fireside Chat. Today we are honored to have a conversation with Magnus Grimeland, founder and CEO of Antler, a business incubator and startup accelerator who have helped build over 750 portfolio companies worldwide. Prior to Antler, Magnus co-founded Zalora.com, Asia's largest e-commerce company. So Magnus, on behalf of Khazanah and all of KMF delegates today, we will welcome you and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So this afternoon, we would like to talk about talent, specifically about how Antlers spot talents and build talents, and what do you look for in getting to individuals that have that creative sparks to build innovation. So I would like you to share your story with the audience today, and then we'll move from there.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for having me. Very excited to be here. I originally come from Norway, grew up there, started my career in the military. Actually, I was in the Naval Special Forces there, and then moved on to Harvard for college. After Harvard, I joined McKinsey, and McKinsey actually brought me to Kuala Lumpur for the first time. So I came here and I worked with one of the tech companies here back in 2009, 2010. And then we set up Zalora in 2012, and very quickly made Kuala Lumpur one of our biggest hubs. So I think at the time, can't quite remember, but I think we had about 500 employees there in Zalora, building up really core part of the machinery of building what is now the biggest fashion e-commerce company in Southeast Asia. What we realized as we were building Zalora is a lot of the people we had hired and trained left to build the next generation companies in Southeast Asia. So for example, Nadim and Kevin, who built Gojek out of Indonesia, are ex-Zalora people. Chris Feng built Shopee, ex-Zalora, Shopback, Stashaway, Aura out of Malaysia here, Lockout, lots of really great companies coming out of Zalora. And that became the genesis of Antler, which is, let's back this next generation founders that come from the last generation great companies in building new businesses. And we set up Zalora in 2018 with that as a mission. We fundamentally believe that society will only move forward if great people choose to innovate and solve important problems. And since then, we rolled out Antler. We're now in 6 continents, in 30 locations, and we get about 120,000 applicants for founders who want to work with us every day. And we're super excited about setting up here in Kuala Lumpur. We've been wanting to do so for a while, and recently, together with Khazanah, Future Malaysia, Dana Impact, we set up here a few months ago. I'm very happy to announce, this is the first official announcement, that yesterday we started the first cohort in Malaysia. So we have 65 founders working with us here now. We got almost about 1,000 applicants.
Wow.
So that started yesterday. And what we do with these founders, thank you. And what we do with these founders is we literally work on building companies from scratch. So we look for incredible people with the right characteristics to be the founders of the next generation great companies. We want to back founders who build for the region, who build globally. We want to back Malaysian founders, but we also want to be open for international founders who want to come to Malaysia and build. If you look at the 65 founders that joined us yesterday, about 70% of them are Malaysians, 30% came from all across the globe. Many exited founders. One of the founders who came, he built a company in China, just IPO'd it, wanted to come to KL and build a company. So we can combine local talent with foreign talent I think we have a great opportunity to build some really great companies. We're going to work with them for 3 months now to put together great co-founding teams and iterate their business models to ensure we have a great team working on building great companies. And then we'll fund them with the first bit of capital. And then you probably heard the VC panel yesterday with 500 startups and so on. We worked then with introducing them to global venture capital companies and local venture capital companies that typically leads their subsequent round, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C. And then Antler also has a pool of capital globally that can put more money into the subsequent round. So we'll put in a bit of money in the first round, and then we want to be backers of these founders all the way to their exit. It's going to be a combination of local capital and global capital deployed into these companies that are set up here in Malaysia.
Exciting.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope that we'll build, future companies from this setup that you have in Kuala Lumpur too.
Yeah.
Now, since we are talking about talent, could you share a bit, when you look at individuals that are very smart, they are going to be creative, what do you look for to make sure that they can build teams that's going to make more successful businesses? So what would be the characteristics and characters that you look out for in order to build your team?
Yeah, so it's definitely the most important part of building a business. If you look at why startups fail, the number one reason is it's not the right co-founder team. The second reason is they didn't choose the right idea to build, and the third reason is they didn't have access to capital. Now, if you think about the second and the third reason, that also comes down to the team, right? Because the team chooses what to build, and the team will also raise the capital. So fundamentally, in the early days, it all comes down to finding exceptional founders. We build now a funnel where, so there's 2 parts to this. One is building a funnel of founders who want to work with you. And the way we do that is we have a network of VCs and advisors, about 1,000 people globally, 3,000 VC relationships. We have a founder community now of about 4,000 founders. They refer people to us. Then we do outbound headhunting. So we basically index the entire LinkedIn database. Probably we contacted some of you here in the room and asked you to be a founder. But basically what we do is we have an algorithm that we put on top of the LinkedIn database to do outreach. And then we're building a brand so that we build a funnel. And now we have the funnel of about 120,000 founders who want to work with us every year. And for the first cohort, over the last 2 months here, we almost got 1,000 applicants who want to come here and build companies with us. So what do we then look at once you build the funnel? What we look for is really 3 things. We want founders who have a spike. Most founders have something that they're better at than most other people. They're not great at everything, but they're really great at something. So we want to identify that spike. The second thing we're looking for is drive. And drive sometimes can be misinterpreted as passion. Like, drive is very different from passion. There's a lot of really passionate founders who never get anything done. So drive is really ambition combined with showing the ability to execute. Right? We want people who want to build something truly big, want to solve a big problem, accomplish something big, and having shown proof in their life up until then that they can execute and move things forward. And the third thing we look for is grit. And I think that's very often misunderstood. Like, there's this feeling that you want to back serial entrepreneurs, and sometimes we get these applicants from a founder who they built 8 companies the last 3 years, but all of them failed. That, for me, doesn't show that you're an experienced founder. That shows that you have very little grit. It means that when you decide to do something, you don't stay the course and go through with what you're trying to accomplish when things get really tough. Yes, it's okay to have failed in the past, but why did it fail? What did you learn from that? People who jump between a lot of different jobs in a row, why did that happen? Right? We want people who, when they are determined to accomplish something, they stay the course, because as you build a business, you will hit these very, very hard moments on the way where it's very easy to give up. And sometimes it's not the best team that wins, but it's the most gritty, determined team that find ways around it, right? So, look at one of the most successful companies coming out of Malaysia, Grab. In the early days, how many issues they had in the early days of getting regulation on their side, fighting against the taxi companies, hiring people, raising money, all of these aspects. A lot of people would have given up, but they powered through, and they're now, really made life better for a lot of people, plus generated a lot of jobs. So, yeah, we look for a spike, drive, and grit. And if we find that in individuals, we bring them on board. On average, our founders have about 10 to 12 years work experience. So we like to back people who have some real experience. There are exceptions to this rule. We back younger founders and older founders. We like diversity in our founders. So we have people from all across the globe, though mostly locals. In the first cohort here in Malaysia, very exciting. Actually, 37% of the founders are women. So we have a great set of really strong female founders coming on board, which we really believe is the future. It's a category of talent which so far globally only receives 1.8% of venture capital, but probably represents 50% of global talent. So, we do a lot of these things to ensure that we get as many people as possible with the right spike, drive, and grit.
Great. So, as you say, even if they have all the traits, and sometimes luck comes with it, or like you said, perseverance to make things happen. How many times do you give a chance? How many opportunities do you give for your founder to fail before you know or you assess that you call it quits? And what is that process?
Yeah, so there are two kind of phases to this. So one of the phases is applying to get into one of the programs, and that's the tightest place to get in. Right now we accept on average globally about 3% of founders applying, but you can apply as many times as you want, right? So like, if you don't get accepted in one program, you might be accepted later, and there's many people who have applied to us 5 or 6 or 7 times, and the 7th time they've done something which piques our mind, and we bring them on board. Then once they're accepted, like right yesterday now, we have an office here, we can host about 100 founders, and yesterday we started with 65 founders, and we'll work with them for 3 months, where the goal is to find an amazing co-founder or 2, and iterate the business model, and then after 3 months, we decide whether we invest or not. And the criteria then is the co-founder team exceptionally strong, and are they working on an area that makes sense and they're solving a real problem? And are they creating momentum? And if we don't invest, then we tell people, hey, please continue to build your business, and then feel free to come back to us. And we always have the door open, right? So, because sometimes, most of the time, this year we'll say no to 119,000 people. So chances are that some of those no's are wrong, right? Yeah. So it's like, what did I think it was Mark Andreessen in Andreessen Horowitz the other day, he talked about LeBron James. LeBron James scored the most amount of points in the NBA, but he also missed the most amount of points. So I think as a venture capitalist that invests really early, you always need to be open to a no being the wrong decision, and keeping the door open for teams that you couldn't back at that particular time, but they might come back with a different set of co-founders, a better idea, more momentum, and then we back them anyways.
Is there any particular founder that you are most proud of that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, so in the Malaysia cohort now, it's been amazing. There's tremendous amount of founders there who built great companies before and had like 20, 30, $100 million exits, and now they want to build the next company. Obviously, we're just starting to invest in Malaysia now, so an example from, I'll take an example from Singapore. We backed these founders from one local founder, one founder who came in from Turkey. They built this amazing company called Aerolo. He'd built a business before, sold that business, wanted to start a new business, and in a matter of months, they literally launched every single country in the world, apart from like 5 countries.
Wow.
And they built the world's largest eSIM marketplace. And we invested in them. 3 months later, we introduced them to Sequoia. Sequoia came on board and led the next round. 1 year later, in the middle of COVID, once their revenue had actually dropped 95% due to COVID temporarily, they raised another round with Rakuten leading the round. We made an introduction. They made it through COVID. Revenue shot up again. Now they're growing double-digit per month. And yeah, in a matter of 3-4 years, they built the world-leading company in what is a very fast-growing business. They're live in more than 100 countries. And they're closing in on the billion-dollar valuation right now. And it all started as we're now starting with these incredible founders here in Malaysia, by finding a great co-founder, iterating a business model, making introductions to our global network of investors, competencies, helping the teams grow. Since we have offices all across Asia and Europe and the US and Africa and South America, we can help companies that are building out of Malaysia to expand quickly into other countries. And our policy is, if people want to build something small for, let's say, Kuala Lumpur, then we are not the right investor. But if you want to build something for Asia or for the world, out of Malaysia, headquartered here, then we are the right partner to back you. So in this particular example, that happened incredibly rapidly.
Great.
And we look forward to seeing 10 or 20 of those a year coming out of KL.
Yes. So as you prepare for that,
Yeah.
is there anything specific that you will do differently, looking at the Malaysian market and then the type of founders that you typically would probably find here?
Yes, so I think that every market ends up being a little bit different, right? So for example, if you go to New York, there's a lot of fintech, there's a lot of deep tech. If you go to Nairobi, which is another office we have, it's a lot of proven models.
Mm-hmm.
I think what is super exciting about KL is that you can actually build across these different types of models, right? We can do deep tech from here. We actually already backed a great deep tech company out of Malaysia called Biogenes. You can build proven models. These are models that work really well in other parts of the world, but it hasn't come to Southeast Asia yet. We have another great company out of Malaysia we already backed called Aura, which are doing that. You can build Industry 4.0 companies that are finding areas where there are inefficiencies in an industry that can be solved by technology. You can build B2B business, B2C businesses. I think in KL, you can actually build within the full spectrum of those industries. And there are a few places like this, right? I think KL is one of those places. Singapore is another place. Seoul is another place like this, where you can really build across the spectrum of business models. So we are really looking to find a diverse set of founders that will build deep tech companies, B2B businesses, Industry 4.0 companies, proven models, B2C concepts. What matters to us is that we believe that the team is incredibly strong so that they can beat competition. But on top of that, if they're solving a completely new problem, that they have the grit and the drive to really make progress on that and ensure that it happens. So I think Malaysia is such a place. What we always have to do when we set up in a new place is form very strong partnerships with the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So for the people who are here now who don't know us, and obviously you're here because you're interested in innovation and the theme of the conference and the future of Malaysia, we'd love to kind of partner with you. We love to partner with businesses locally. We love to partner with all the other VCs, government institutions, and particularly if you know great people who want to build great companies, we rely on kind of our networks to have them come our way so we can back them from the early days. And there, Khazanah has also been incredibly helpful with kind of looping us into the ecosystem here to ensure that we become a part of the value chain, right? Because we don't really look at ourselves as a competitor to anyone since we start so early. We hopefully are a feeder of the innovation ecosystem where we back some of the founders that are too early on for other parts of the ecosystem and can help generate new companies.
Great. I hope you will find those partners that will build that, potential future unicorn from Malaysia. Now, coming back to you, I would like to for you to share with us a little bit more about your journey and what were some of the challenges and the milestones that you went through that you can share with the audience, so for us to learn from.
Yeah. So I think choosing to be a founder is always challenging, right? So when we were building up Zalora, my previous job was in McKinsey, and in McKinsey we would stay at like 5-star hotels and fly business class everywhere, and it was good support level and all of that. And suddenly we're just a bunch of people who are trying to save as much money as we can, and we're sharing hotel rooms in 3-star hotels, flying, a Lion Air and the cheapest kind of tickets we can get across Southeast Asia to build out the business. So that was one transition. The other transition is, and I always tell our founders that, a lot of founders, I think, particularly first-time founders, go into the experience of building a business with some sort of romantic view on how it is. Mm-hmm. But being a founder is really like living in a tent, eating, whatever food is available to you, working 100-hour weeks for 2 years to get momentum and get things off the road. It's a quite kind of gritty culture in the early days. And the other part is, if you've been part of a larger organization prior, which I've been in McKinsey, and particularly in consulting or banking or these types of areas, you're used to giving people advice instead of making decisions. And as a founder, you need to make decisions. You need to make, dozens, if not hundreds of decisions every day. And some of those decisions are critical. I call them one-way door decisions, right? You walk in the door, you can't go back. You need to spend real time on them. But most of them are, you just got to 80-20. You got to figure out, okay, I'm 80% sure this is the right choice. Let's make the decision, move the business forward. And that was a big transition for me, going from kind of McKinsey into entrepreneurship. And we talk a lot to our founders about this as well, who come from these areas, because a lot of our founders are experienced entrepreneurs who built things before, but also a lot of people are coming from other leading institutions, and they're all facing this transformation.
Right.
And we tell them, hey, if you don't like it, then don't build anything, because we don't want to back you and you figure it out 6 months later that you don't want to do it. Then just make the decision now. Go back and work in McKinsey if that's what you want to do. But if you like it and you're able to make that transition, it's an incredible journey, right? I know there's a lot of founders here in the room, and you get to kind of build something truly amazing. Once you get the first customer on board, it's a great feeling. Once you get your first investor on board, once you hire the first great employee, and you keep hitting these milestones again and again and again, and you become more impactful for society. So, I think probably my biggest learning out of all of this, which I also tell people in our recruiting process for new founders, is the biggest mistake founders do is waiting too long to become a founder.
That's a good one. Yep. Okay. In previous interviews, you mentioned the importance of equal opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. That to enable individuals to use talents and go change the world. So looking at in Malaysia, in our landscape is slightly different. How would you do that? How would Antler plan? How your process would be?
Yes. So I fundamentally believe in creating a quality of opportunity. And if you create a quality of opportunity, then you will be able to fully access the global available talent pool, right? Now, if you look at innovation, there are these tremendous stories of people growing up in very poor circumstances, perhaps in a completely different country than where they ended up building their business. And then through kind of hard work, they ended up getting the right networks, which enabled them to raise a bit of capital and launch their first business, right? And in Southeast Asia, there's a tremendous amount of these stories of people who kind of come out of nowhere and build, large conglomerates. And if we can enable more of those stories to happen, you will be able to access more of society's raw talent power. So we believe that with Antler, what we're creating is, we have a network of 1,000 advisors, we have 300 full-time people, we have a tech platform with a bunch of perks we negotiated with the world's largest companies, we have playbooks, we work together, we can provide access to capital, we can provide all of those networks that, I was lucky to get myself through being able to go to Harvard, being able to go work in McKinsey and so on. Through that, I built a lot of networks that I could utilize when I built Zalora and I built Antler. But I want to provide that, or we want to provide that to everyone, right? And if you look at the first generation founders in any ecosystem, very often the most successful early founders in an ecosystem come from more privileged backgrounds. Sure. Because it's almost a necessity, right? Because if you come from a less privileged background, you don't want to take the risk because you might have a family to take care of, you might need a salary, you might not have the networks that will enable you to achieve solving an important problem. So we want to just de-risk that completely and ensure that it goes down to the fundamental strength of the individual, right? So the networks, the founders that we're backing here now in Malaysia can access are way better than the networks I had when we were starting up Zalora and we were starting up Antler, because we've created that network. So we can provide an opportunity for people to leverage their kind of core skill set and their core raw talent to build something great instead of having to rely on coming from a very privileged background. We still have a bunch of founders in our cohort that does come from a privileged background. We also want to back these founders, of course, because they can leverage their own networks on top of the Antler network. But we also want to ensure that people who otherwise perhaps wouldn't have taken the risk will go on and found companies with us. And in the end, we'll just invest in the best people.
Right.
But the outcome of this has been, with us, without doing any type of affirmative action or quotas, we don't have any quotas or anything like that, we just invest in the best people. We ended up with a very diverse set of founders in our portfolio. We've backed founders from 81 nations, from all types of socioeconomic backgrounds. 30% of our portfolio has a female co-founder. And I think this has all been about creating a quality of opportunity. Because if you can take that risk, and the way we de-leverage the risk is when people are accepted into our program, they get a small grant, so you can cover kind of basic living expenses. And then if we invest in you, you get the first bit of capital, so you can start paying yourself a salary. So you take away a little bit of the economic risk. And then we provide access to all those networks and companies that I talked about earlier that just makes it easier for more great people to pursue entrepreneurship and build great businesses than otherwise would have happened. And I think that impact on society is pretty big because, Antler's mission is to make progress inevitable, which goes back to us believing that the only way society will progress is if people spend real time on innovating and solving important problems, which is obviously also one of the core themes of this conference and why we've been so fortunate to work with the Khazanah, Dana Impact, and Future Malaysia. So excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you for those sharing. I would like to take a bit more time so that we can have a question and answer at this time. If we have a question from the floor, we can start. Is there anybody before we go to the virtual audience? Anyone with any question? Yeah. Number 4?
Yeah. Hello. I would like to know, you clearly have met a lot of different founders in your career. And out of all these founders, some have seen success and some have not. But what is one person-related decision in your career that you've done, with the benefit of hindsight, you would make a different decision now?
I mean, there's a ton of them. I mean, I consistently learn. Actually, I keep, and it's probably a bunch of you do this, but if not, I find it very helpful to, I actually have a sheet which is called Feedback to Magnus, where I keep writing down things that I can do better. And it's quite interesting because this thing has been running for 20 years now. And so I can literally go back and kind of look at things that I thought, where I thought I could have done things better in the past. When it comes to people, I mean, the number one learning is typically to act faster, right? So particularly in situations where things are not working out. There's lots of learnings on this from big companies. I really love the founder of Netflix wrote a book on the Netflix culture, and he talks a lot about this. And they had to, at some point in time during Netflix growth, they had to let go a lot of people because they didn't have the money to pay them. And they went through and ensured that the people they had to let go was the kind of worst parts of the organization. And what ended up happening is the teams become more effective. So with half the size of the organization, they could actually deliver more by just having 10x people in there instead of having average people. And I think when you build a business as a founder, you are incredibly dependent on having these 10x type people, particularly in the beginning, because the problems you're trying to solve are so important or so big and so difficult, and you need to create early momentum. So unless you have like those type of individuals in the organization, somebody else is going to solve the problem better than you, or you're not going to be able to solve it. And there's also always a reason to not change a specific individual, right? Because they might be doing something well. So it's a hard decision to make, particularly also in a startup, because it's such a small group of people and everyone is friends and so on. And very often people also tend to hire people they know because it's the only way they're able to get people on board in the early days. But yeah, so I think the number one thing we should have done on occasion is change people who didn't work quicker. And very, very seldom do you regret that in retrospect. Because once you get the right person in the role, as a founder and as a leader of the organization, life just becomes so much better. And I think everyone here has experienced that, where the difference between having someone who's kind of average versus someone who's 10x.
Last one. Number 6, yeah. That's one question. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Wandi Raza. I'm from research team within Khazanah National. So Magnus, you talk about spike within a person, right? So from the perspective of you selecting the founder and nurturing them, so how do you capture that? How do you detect and capture that? Because I'm pretty sure that through the hiring system, it's hard for someone to showcase this spike. And also, what are your tips for someone that's going through the hiring process to showcase your spike, or rather your quality, more towards the selection committee? Thank you.
Yeah, so great question. So fundamentally, this is not only true, I think, for founders, but I think it's true in any business, that knowing your strength and leveraging that strength as a leader is insanely important. And then, yes, you need to ensure that you don't have too many big weaknesses, right? But you should spend more time on leveraging your strength than making your weaknesses better. Because typically what you're weak at, you won't get better at. You won't get better at other people at something you're weak at, right? It's actually some really interesting research there from McKinsey. So in McKinsey, you get feedback consistently when you've done a bunch of projects. So it's a very feedback-driven organization. And they looked at people who came into McKinsey and got feedback when they started. And they looked at people who'd been there for 20 years and what feedback they got 20 years later. And the feedback was more or less exactly the same, right? So these are people who worked on becoming better for 20 years, and they still have the same strengths and the same weaknesses. So, I think leverage your strength. Now, how do you figure out if people has that strength and what that strength is? The best way is to ask, right? So we ask, and we fundamentally, the very best founders out there actually know what they're really good at. So very often they will give you an answer which is the right one, and then you stress test that, right? You say, okay, so tell me about periods of your life where you use that skill set. You know, if you're really great at this, what are the type of people you would hire first or bring in as your co-founders to complement your skill set or complement your strength? How you become better at it? And then within each category, you just ask why, right? So like, what's your strength? Okay, it might be I'm great at inspiring and hiring people. Okay, why do you think you're great at inspiring and hiring people? Well, because of this, and that. Why? And somebody who has that as a clear strength, you can go really, really deep. And they will still have really meaningful answers. But somebody who just blurts out that they're great at inspiring and hiring people, after 2 or 3 whys, you realize that they're kind of making things up. so you know, and it could be something like skill set like this, or it could be something which is much more specific, right? You know, somebody will say, well, I believe I'm the best C++ coder in Malaysia. Like, nobody can write better code than me. Then typically you also want a technical person to interview that individual, and he will do the same thing. Why, show me, blah, blah, blah. And then very quickly you'll figure out whether it's a real strength or whether it's just something someone is making up. And we do the same for each of these areas. We do the same for drive, and we do the same for grit. And it's, you know, it's a proven method. It's what police has been using for hundreds of years to interview criminals about whether they committed a crime or not. It works like a charm.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions from the floor before we go virtual? No. Before we go to the, do we have questions from virtual audience? Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, here's a question. With Antler having all these different offices globally, what's the key difference in corporate culture that you have observed? Is there any lessons from this?
So, so we just gathered all of our partners, including Frank, who runs it here in Malaysia, in Amsterdam 2 weeks ago. Every year we actually change locations. We should come and do the gathering here at some point. I think everyone would find that exciting. And the interesting thing is, I think we've been able to build a very strong firm culture globally where people share the same set of values. So our number for one value is founders first, because that's our customer. The second is build our people, which is related to all the stuff we've been talking about today. And we have 6 of these values, and people kind of know them by heart, and they work in that way. And it's quite interesting because, you know, we talk about it in everything that we do, and it's interesting for me when I travel across the globe, and even here where we just set up in Malaysia, the team has only been on the ground for 2 months, and they're inhabiting these values because we talk about it all the time. So I think in terms of the core values, it's very similar. We enable that by building one tech stack, one common set of tools that we use. We have one Wikipedia, Antler Wikipedia, which everyone uses, which has the best practices and playbooks for everything. And so there's a number of enabling factors there. And I think that is critical to ensure that you become a company and a partnership and not a set of franchises. And the set of franchises in our business would not work as well because a lot of the power of the platform is the whole. So that's critical. Now, you still obviously have like cultural differences, right? You know, like you go to Germany and everyone shows up 3 minutes before the meeting, and you go to Spain and everyone shows up 5 minutes after the meeting. Obviously diversity in Malaysia is very different from diversity in the US,
Yeah.
right? There was a newspaper in the US who asked me, how many black founders we were backing out of Singapore, and it's obviously a completely different ratio than in the US because the societal setup is different. So there are cultural differences like this. But the fundamental firm values are the same, and that I think is insanely important. And we interview the partners that we bring on board in the values. We talk a lot about it. I do onboarding of every single new person that comes into Antler. We spend an hour talking about our values, our vision, and our strategy. And that's amazing because then you become power of partnership. So we've been very lucky to make that happen, and it's something I learned over time, right? I think organizations with great cultures, great values, and where the leadership and the people who work there embody it, tend to outperform. I mean, probably a lot of you have read Good to Great and other books on this stuff, but it's 100% correlated, right?
Thank you. We'll probably take one more virtual question before I have one question to ask you. How do you break it to a founder if their business model or product simply won't work from experience as a founder of Global VC?
It's a great question. So, let's start with a story. So, how many of you know Spotify? Most of you know Spotify, right? So our CIO, so the Chief Investment Officer of Antler, his name is KCR Group. They led the first round into Spotify, which was I think they got about a third or 20% of the company for $5 million. So it was amazing investment. Now, how many VCs do you think had said no to that Spotify deal before they said yes? Anyone want to guess? 23 VCs. So 23 VCs have said no to what ended up being the very best deal the Nordics has ever seen, right? In venture capital. And you ask every founder about this. You can talk to Anthony Tan, you can talk to any founder. They will talk about so many people who said no to them on the way. So what I tried to say to founders that we say no to is, there's probably a higher likelihood that we are wrong and you are right than the other way around. So don't be too dejected by this no. It's just, we are one of those 23 VCs who said no to Spotify.
It's a good story.
So continue to build your business and come back to us all the time. This is not the final no. We'd like to kind of back you when the time is right. So that's one thing. And then we also try to be helpful in some way, right? So could we introduce this person to a customer? Can we introduce them to someone they can hire? Is there an investor out there that might be interested in what they're doing? Are there mentors or angel investors or someone we can introduce them to? So that the no comes with something that is valuable to their progress. And I think if you do it that way, then people actually don't take it as hard, right? Because it's the case. I also very often talk about how many times I've gotten no's. We still get no's all the time from people we try to hire or founders we want to bring into the program, right? So it's just something you need to get comfortable with as a founder, and it's much more likely that we are wrong and you are right.
Right. Thank you. My final question.
Yeah.
How do you generally reward and motivate your own team?
Yes, so obviously there's the fundamentals of venture capital where you want to ensure that your team is 100% aligned with your LPs and your founder's success, right? So if the founders are successful, we'll deliver great returns back to our LPs, and then our team should be well rewarded. So we try to distribute carry widely to the entire team. Carry is the share of the profits that then will go to the team. So we try to keep salaries quite low, actually, and then ensure the carry upside is high. That means that we can bring on more people, create more leverage, and people have a real vested interest in the upside. Now, but that's just financial upside. So, what is interesting is, and you probably know a lot about this in your role, right? But actually, most people, as long as you've sorted out the basic incentive structure on the financial side, recognition, availability of leadership, transparency, culture, these things just matter actually much more in the long term.
Exactly.
So we spend a lot of time. Actually, it was quite funny. Our CFO is always viewed as a little bit of a negative person in our company, but you know, he just got this HR award now because a set of people around the world had kind of gathered around to create a movement around getting an award to him, so he would be a little bit more happy. But we do these awards regularly where people can nominate people all across the firm, and we do a big thing out of it. And it's not a big monetary reward. People get $250 to bring their team out for dinner. So we do a lot of these types of things to just drive recognition. And that is so much more valuable. Well, I mean, you got to sort out the basic first, right? But once you sort out the basic, that's much more valuable than anything else. So that's kind of my major learning on that. Was that the last question?
Yep, that's the last question. Our time's up.
Yeah.
Too. And thank you so much. And thank you for sharing. And I would like to, ask everyone to give a round of applause to Magnus.
Can I just before?
Sure.
I just thank you all for listening, and just also very appreciative of the Khazanah relationship. And I spoke with the Minister of Trade and Industry earlier, and the big focus on innovation. So we are very excited about the opportunity here. Big request to everyone: if you know any great founders, Antler.co, Malaysia, send them that way. If you know people who are kind of interested in what we're doing and want to be part of our advisory network here, operator network, send them our way. If you're interested in partnering us in any way, we're just getting started here, and we'd love to create as much leverage as possible and work with as many of you as possible. So, reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter. My email is magnus@antler.co. Want to make this launch really big here in Malaysia, so thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you.